accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, friends, to another episode of the podcast of OA. This is episode number 201. I'm your host, Myron Rumsey, and I am joined by my good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you doing these days?
Good, man. Everything's going well. We've got some nice fall weather going on, so it was a bit chilly today, so looking forward to it. I like this weather.
Good. I'm looking forward to Halloween coming up here pretty soon. And so you and I are recording this a little early just because we're both going to be out of town. You're going to Las Vegas and I'm going to Mars. So you're taking a family trip to Las Vegas and I'm going to Mars, Pennsylvania for the Monster Bash.
I'm so jealous. It's so fun.
I'm a big classic horror, like pre-1980s horror junkie. And my wife and I were like, we haven't gone to a horror convention in a long, long time. And I've always wanted to go to this particular show. So I'm going to be there. So if anybody else by chance is going to the Monster Bash in Mars, Pennsylvania, look me up. I'll be walking around with my wife. I won't be wearing any Green Lantern stuff because it's a different venue. I'll be wearing some horror t-shirts and stuff. But I'll be there. If you're going to go, drop me a line on Twitter or Facebook or something. And I'd love to meet up with anybody who might be going. But I'm really looking forward to it. And speaking of great stuff, you and I just got done recording and releasing episode number 200 with our good friend Bill Giancoli, our original co-host. And that was such a great conversation. I loved it.
Yeah, it really was. I like Bill, man. He's just a real nice guy, and I don't get to talk to him enough. So he should make a random appearance every now and then on the show. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, it was neat looking back over, it wasn't just 200 episodes, it was 10 years, celebrating 10 years of the show. And it was neat to look back on some things. And it was funny how some of the things that you and Bill were your favorite memories were also mine. So that was really kind of fun. And yeah. I just enjoyed kind of reminiscing a little bit. And it was a little self-indulgent, I realized, but it was neat to look back over things and do some fun memories. And for anybody who listened to the episode and didn't listen all the way through, I hid the Guy Gardner interview segment that we talked about during the show. I went back and grabbed the audio for that, tried to clean it up a little bit, and stuck it after the end music. So it's a little bit of an Easter egg for anybody who paid attention all the way through it and survived our 2-hour-long chat fest.
Yeah, it was a good time though, man. It's like a roundtable discussion. It's like it's good to talk about books that come out in monthly editions and stuff like that, and writers and artists and stuff like that. But to have a good roundtable discussion with comic book fans, like-minded and otherwise, that's always a refreshing time. I don't get enough of it. I wish we had like a group that I could go to and just sit around and shoot the breeze about whatever's comics are going on, but alas, I don't have any.
Well, yeah, it was great, and a thank you, a big thank you again to everybody who sent in their congratulations and listener feedback. I was really a little overwhelmed with how many responses we got from people who chimed in and wished us well and shared some of their favorite moments and so on. It's very much appreciated. So we're back to talking about weekly comics and so on, and we've got 3 issues to talk about in this particular episode. We've got Green Lantern number 7 that's just off the presses, and Justice League Last Ride number 5 and 6, because we haven't talked about last month's issue, and so we've got a couple issues of that to talk about as well as another great installment of Know Your Core, and some more listener feedback, which I'm looking forward to. But before we get to all of that, we've got a little bit of Green Lantern news. Not much of anything really, but Phil, did you watch DC Fandome?
No, I did not.
So one of us is smarter than the other, and that smarter one would be you.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I knew the event was coming, and I was like, and I told myself one or two things. It's like, I could invest my time into watching this nonsense. And by nonsense, I mean that I went into it thinking that they'd do some kind of Green Lantern reveal. But I already had it in my mind that they weren't going to do anything like that. Because usually you hear static about it. It's like, they might release this, and they might release that. And if you follow the trends, it's usually pretty easy to figure out what they are or aren't going to show. And I figured if they were going to have a Green Lantern panel, they would have announced something that had to do with it. So when they didn't, I was like, nope, I'm not watching it. I'll just pick it up on Twitter. So, and that's what I did. The Aquaman trailer looks awesome, though.
Yeah.
Aquaman footage.
Yeah, the Aquaman stuff looked really good, and the trailer for Black Adam was really, really good. I like that.
Yeah, that's going to be a killer movie. So.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But I dutifully sat through it and waited and hoped and was trying to be optimistic because there was a leak out there supposedly of some of the panels, and the rumor was there was going to be a full cast reveal for the HBO Max show, and I took that with a big, huge grain of salt, but there were a couple of little things for Green Lantern. Not much. There was no spotlight on Green Lantern or anything like that, but they did announce their animated slate for 2022, and in summer of 2022 we're going to finally get another Green Lantern centric animated film. It's going to be called Green Lantern Beware My Power. No details were released, of course, nothing about plot or characters or cast or anything. And there's a lot of conjecture out there. Some people talk about, hey, that was the name of the title for the issue in which Jon Stewart debuted, and given how DC seems to be focusing on Jon Stewart right now, maybe it's going to be a Jon Stewart film. Certainly could be. It's also Beware My Power was the title of a story during the Morrison run, so could it be something from the Morrison run? I don't know. I was frankly hoping that if we were going to get a Green Lantern movie, it was going to be a Green Lantern Corps movie, and maybe instead of Beware My Power, it'd be Beware Our Power, and it would be kind of maybe the Four Corpsmen or something to that effect. But I'm not sure what to expect. I'm not gonna get my hopes up for it, but I'm going to be paying attention to see what comes out, and I'll either support it or not support it depending on what I see. I don't have a lot of faith right now in DC or Warner Brothers.
Worth noting to Green Lantern Beware My Power, if you Google it, you're the second hit that comes up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right behind Green Lantern Beware My Power DC Movies Wiki, wherever that is.
Wow. I'll take it.
Yeah, you're the second hit.
Wow.
So but I mean, okay, so I'll speak about that, right? I mean, kudos for you being on, kudos for the blog being on there for the second hit, but also sad for DC not I don't know, giving information about it so people can Google it, and that's the hit that comes up is news about the animated feature. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like nothing. It's like nothing. No official release things. No, but that's the treatment they have. Now, if it would have been Batman, I mean, of course, I'm not going to lie, and I will say this here and now on this podcast, I watched the trailer, and the Batman looks really, really cool. I'm not going to lie. It looks great.
I'm glad I'm sitting down.
But that said, I mean, if it's anything Batman when they release, I mean, there's usually full spreads about it. Oh, this is coming out. Oh, that's coming out. Because, they have 15 issues, Batman 15 issues a week coming out on everything. But I don't know, man. That just makes me sad about Green Lantern stuff. I mean, there's not even any news, anything about it.
Right.
No. So, anyway, that's why I didn't watch.
I
knew it was good.
The last reference to Beware My Power I was thinking about was also the title of the premiere episode of Green Lantern the Animated Series.
Yes, it was. You're right.
So maybe. I know I'm grasping at straws and being hopeful, but we'll see. The other thing that was shown, it was interesting. There really wasn't anything in terms of Green Lantern artwork shown during all the fan art. But Jon Stewart was shown in a story trailer for the upcoming Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video game. And I saw somebody mention that in an interview with the developer mentioned that Jessica Cruz and Hal were in it as well. But I couldn't find that either, so I don't know whether that's true or not. But Jon Stewart was shown in the trailer. Not exactly a comic accurate costume, but we know that's kind of what happens when they do these adaptations, is they like to put their own spin on things.
Sure.
Other little bit of Green Lantern news. Over in the Superman Son of Kal-El series, issue number 4 just came out, and the Justice League made an appearance, and Hal is in the Justice League. Again, don't put a whole lot of stock in that. I don't think that means that he's going to be a regular member of the Justice League. I just think that's what they chose to draw, and there was a couple of lines that Hal had, but I don't know as if that necessarily ties to main continuity, if there is such a thing anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused with the continuity itself. But then again, I'm not reading much besides Green Lantern and Last Ride. Those are the only 2 books I'm reading from DC right now. So I don't know where they are in whatever storyline.
Yeah, the only DC books I'm reading right now are actually horror books. I'm reading the Conjuring book series, which just ended. It was a miniseries, and the recommendation you gave me at the last house on the Nice House on the Lake.
Yeah, I have to read that. I haven't read the last issue that just came out. I think I got it here on my iPad locked and loaded, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
I have to go back and reread from the beginning because I kind of missed an issue here or there, and I think it's one of those things where there's so much detail you have to keep it fresh in your mind. But boy, what a story!
It really is. But what's really odd is the first is I'm on issue 4. I haven't read 4 yet. The first 3 issues are 30 pages. Issue 4 is 17.
Yeah, it's kind of odd.
Yeah.
But the Conjuring was a 5-issue miniseries that I have to read it yet. I've got all 5 issues, but those are the only DC books I'm buying right now.
Yeah, not much out there that I like. I mean, I like Barry Allen, and Wally West is on the Flash title right now, so anyway, whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? Anyway, we've got some comics to talk about, and before we get to that, we have a Know Your Core segment to do.
All right.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
Fellow Owens, welcome back to another great segment of Know Your Core. This week, we have a character by the name of Amanita. Amanita's first appearance was in Green Lantern Volume 3, number 20, shelf date of January 1992. Character created by Gerard Jones and Pat Broderick. Amanita hails from the home planet of Mascaria, Space Sector 3100. Amanita hails from the planet Mascaria, where its inhabitants are a fungus-based species of humanoids. The beings from Mascaria have extremely long lifespans. It is a widely circulated yet unconfirmed rumor that Amanita is even older than the Guardians of the Universe themselves. Amanita possesses a cosmic awareness that is said to be on par with that of the Guardians. It is unknown if this ability is natural to his species or is a power possessed only by Amanita. He was originally recruited into the Green Lantern Corps by Larvox and Hal Jordan. Jordan had been tasked with rebuilding the Corps after the Guardians returned from their self-imposed exile, which followed the first destruction of the Central Power Battery. Jordan agreed with Larvox's assessment of Amanita and thought the character would be an ideal fit for Jordan's vision of a more well-rounded and diverse Corps. There you are, fellow Owens, Amanita, Green Lantern of Space Sector 3100.
All right, well, before we start talking about the next issue, I'm going to need a minute to talk about Amanita.
Poor Amanita.
Amanita is one of the Green Lanterns that was unfortunately killed in the new series. So he's unfortunately departed our plane of existence.
Poor guy.
So anyway,
I wonder how fungus dies like that, though.
I don't know. There's no longer a fungus among us.
I guess not. And go you 2 for 2 on the puns.
I can't help it. It's bad.
Keep going.
So anyway, we've got an issue of Green Lantern to talk about, and this particular issue is Green Lantern number 7, just released. A little bit of a continuation of what's been going on, but not a whole lot of forward movement. I think for me, the most interesting part of this issue, if I could look for something positive to talk about, I did really kind of like the time travel segment where Lonar takes John Stewart back to see not only the new gods, but the really new gods take on the apocalyptic forces way back in the day before Darkseid was Darkseid and Highfather was Highfather.
Yeah, that was kind of a cool... I mean, I don't think that's ever been done before, so it's kind of cool to go back that far.
Yeah, Granny Goodness wasn't a granny at that point, I don't think.
No, she wasn't. But I do have a question about this issue.
Uh-huh.
And you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. Now, I have a major problem with this particular issue. Well, it's twofold, but we'll get to the second part later. Number one is the cover. Kilowog's not even in this book, and it says Kilowog's Last Stand.
Right. Both the cover and the solicitation for this issue both pointed to this issue being about them getting to Kilowog and trying to rescue him, and them encountering this character that's called the Lightbringer. And it looks almost like the cover and the solicitation is actually more in tune with what we might get next issue. But, you know, I as comic fans, we're kind of used to the cover not being exactly true, but this one is like incredibly not true.
Well, it's not even an illusion. I mean, it's not even. I mean, those characters that are stabbing Kilowog, I'm not sure whoever. I mean, I know there's variant covers out there, so I got the one that shows Kilowog getting stabbed or whatever. Those creatures are in here, I think, right? I think we saw those, but like, I kept looking. I actually had to look back 3 times because, like, okay, he's got to be in here, right? I mean, why would you put a character on there and say Last Stand and not even have the character even make an appearance in the book? That doesn't make sense to me. But like you said, I mean, comic books are notorious for not showing or depicting what exactly is taking place in the comic book itself. But under normal, usually there's some illusion going on.
Yeah, I almost feel like this cover should have been for the next issue. And the same with the solicit. I'm not sure what happened there, but obviously somebody was not. You know, I don't hold Jeffrey Thorne and the artists, you know, Marco Santucci and Tom Rainey at fault for that, because they know the issue they're working on, but it seems like somebody in DC messed up.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it feels like. And if that's the case, I mean, that's a disservice to Thorne and Rainey, but like, or Santucci too, but at the same time, it's like, is this how you treat your books? I mean, not paying attention for what the hell's going on? You can't even put the cover right? But let's get into it. I'll get into my second beef about this issue.
So, you know, it does start out with this little bit of a, you know, they're on their way to go and rescue Kilowog and try to deal with that. And Lonar kind of takes John Stewart on a little bit of a journey. And he alludes to the memory that Shikari kind of woke up in John about his time as a Guardian, which we kind of see a moment where the Guardians kind of made John forget that he had ascended to guardianhood. And he uses this time travel segment to show us the Owens fighting against the apocalyptic forces, the New God forces, kind of in a 3-way battle. And the Owens are kind of don't want to deal with, you know, wants to deal with these guys because they're fighting and so on. And it's almost this whole Lords of Order versus Lords of Chaos. You know, the Owens are very scientific, and so this whole thing with magic is chaotic. And you kind of see, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce the weapon, but the weapon we saw back in that very first issue of the series that is designed to attack chaos is in this issue as well. It's kind of, you know, they're pulling that forward and using it. The one thing I have a bit of a trouble with, and you know I love my Lantern lore, so I was kind of eating this stuff up a little bit, but I don't believe that the Owens were tall. The way I recall it, and maybe it's just age, but I thought that the Maltusians, which become the Guardians of Oa, the Maltusians were the full height beings, and over time they became more diminutive, and then they left to go to Oa. But maybe I've got it wrong. There's been enough retellings and enough changes here and there that I could be completely wrong. It was a little interesting to see them using weapons that seemed to be harnessing parts of the emotional spectrum. You saw some green beams and some yellow beams and some violet beams, even some that made almost Star Sapphire shaped constructs. Yeah. And that was kind of interesting. I don't know where it falls into the timeline, and I'm not going to get wrapped up in the minutia, but it was interesting to see them kind of fighting against each other and seeing Darkseid before he becomes Darkseid. He's still Oxus at this point, and Highfather's Isaiah, and they look so young here. So it gives you a really good depiction of how far back this goes. And basically, Lonar uses this to unlock John's memory, and John jumps into the fray and takes on Darkseid. He punches Darkseid, and there's a bit of a scuffle there, and then Darkseid shoots him after the battle goes on. Darkseid shoots John, and he turns into this being of green energy with a symbol in his chest. And then when it flashes back to our time, John has a completely different outfit, and he's glowing green with the green eyes, and you get the impression that John has kind of moved back to the full Guardian type of powers. And that's this half of the story.
And because he doesn't have a ring on.
No. So you get the impression that it's internalized.
Yeah, must be. He's got a cool looking outfit, though.
Yeah, it's a cool looking outfit. I kind of felt like, boy, this was a long way to get to that point in this issue. You could have, I don't know. My problem is with this whole series. One of my problems has been that you've got two stories running simultaneously that you could have made two minis instead of having one book. And so you've got people dropping $5 a month on a book that's moving at a really, really slow pace. And in a lot of the comments I read online, people are complaining that it's boring and it's moving too slow. But if you had this as a 6-issue mini, two different 6-issue minis running simultaneously that maybe kicked off with a special, and then the stories diverge and you get two different books, that people could have picked up the story that they were interested in and not have to buy one they're not, and accelerate the story because the issues would have been devoted completely to one thread or the other. But
right, because they don't even cross over at all.
Not yet, and maybe will that change? I don't know. I don't know what's coming. I didn't have too much of a problem with the story. One of the things that this does that I don't want to say it changes history, but it makes you wonder now, because Ganthet sees John Stewart, does that mean that when the Guardians told Hal to recruit John as a backup, did they do that knowing that John appeared in the far past?
That's a good point. Wouldn't they call it a retcon?
It could be a retcon. It may not be, but you have to assume that the Guardians have such great memories. And at one point, John actually calls them the Guardians and calls Ganthet by name. I can't imagine that Ganthet wouldn't remember that and realize, oh, this John Stewart is a younger version of this character that met us years ago, eons ago. Maybe not, but maybe it was preordained. Hard to say. But it certainly lends itself to that possibility.
Well, let me ask you this. So you're the one positing this theory, right?
Well, I don't know whether it's my theory, but...
Well, let's just say that would you think the writers of this book know their Green Lantern lore enough to pull that thread like that, though?
Well, I mean, I think Jeff Thorne, if anything, is a Jon Stewart fan and has read everything to do with Jon Stewart. So
he should know that, though.
Yeah, I imagined he knows that. And I as critical as I am of Jeffrey Thorne's writing, it wouldn't surprise me that he tries to make it that John was chosen for a particular reason rather than just being kind of somewhat randomly chosen.
Gotcha. I mean, and it's not bad writing. I mean, it's actually a really, really cool ploy if that's what you're doing. And kudos to him for coming up with that kind of concept,
Yeah. It may be pre-thought that way. It may just be coincidental. Hard to say, because we're 7 issues into a 12-issue arc, so we've got 5 more months. And will that become a plot point at some point, or will it just simply be something for fans to think about? Who knows?
I don't know what I'm more worried about in 5 months. The fact that this book will end and we may not get another Green Lantern title, or then I have to go through 5 more months to get to that answer.
I'm more worried they're going to say it's going to continue.
Or that too.
So
the
story jumps into being from instead of the dark spaces to now, and this entire back half is really a character piece more than anything else. You know, Joe Mullane is there, and Simon Baz finally puts two and two together and determines that the Sinestro Corps member that interacted with Kelly and took Kelly out was Jessica Cruz. Dumbest man in the room.
Yeah. Almost gets his throat slit.
So they're trying to work on Kelly, and they decide to try to take the gauntlet off her while she's unconscious, and her subconscious reaches out and attacks everybody except for Simon Baz. And Simon kind of walks his way through the ship as the ship's being rendered asunder by all of these Green Lantern-y type constructs, and calms her down because she doesn't attack him over their connection they have on an emotional level, and Simon kind of calms her down. Along the way, we learn a couple of little bits of information. One is that Counselor Fell has some information about the destruction of the power battery, or the deconstruction of the power battery. And she's not going to tell Joe Mullane over an open channel what they've discovered. So there is a tiniest bit of forward momentum in the plot. The other thing we see is, while we knew Iolande was safe, that she was one of the ones that was identified, we see Badge and Larvox in this issue, both recovering from some wounds, but looking pretty healthy.
Oh, Larvox. Pull through.
So it's nice to at least see those two characters have survived. But other than that, I don't know what to think about the back half, because I don't care about Simon, and I don't care about Kelly. I don't care about the relationship. So for me, it was kind of flat.
No, that was going to be my second point. There's too much Simon in it. Again, this is going to go back. So he's just a filler character at this point, right? He doesn't have any powers, so he's just kind of there. You know, he doesn't hold a prominent role to me. He just feels like he's just we need to do something with him, so let's just have him do this. Now, he is a part of this particular story arc, and that's fine, but again, I just feel like he's insignificant. But, hey, I rail on Simon all the time. Let me give him a break for now.
He did good in this issue.
He did do good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do genuinely like the relationship him and Joe Mullane are building. I think it's kind of cool. I mean, I don't, whatever it is whatever it is, but like, I do see them two being decent characters together at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that. I don't think they deserve their own book, but if they're characters and they're doing a team up, that's fine. I hope it's a subplot to something. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I just didn't find a lot about this issue to get excited over. Like I said, the Green Lantern junkie in me who loves the Lantern lore liked seeing the New Gods part.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, it was a small piece of interest.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It was just blah.
Yeah, it was just kind of there. So anyway, that was that particular issue. Why don't we take a quick break and we'll come back and talk about Justice League Last Ride.
Yeah.
This is Robert Vendetti, and you're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Phil, we've got 2 issues of Justice League Last Ride, and boy, what a way to lead up to the final. I mean, this takes us right up to the final issue, which, it's odd to see a 7-issue miniseries. Usually 8's kind of the magic number, 6 or 8. So, interesting to see that it's 7. But boy, do things really kind of crank up in these 2 issues. And 5 kind of ends in a bit of a cliffhanger, and then 6 does as well. So I generally find myself, when I get done reading these issues of this particular series, that I really kind of like Chip Zdarsky to be writing the Justice League proper, because I think, while, yes, it's another Darkseid story, but it's also Darkseid and Lobo and Cyborg Superman and a number of characters all together in this, and so it just feels like an event.
Well, remember, it's Brainiac, Cyborg, Superman.
Right, that's true. Yep, Brainiac's infused with it.
Yeah, whatever they would call that. And we also should shout out to Miguel Mendonca about. I hope I said that right, Mendonca. That artwork, man, his art's awesome.
Oh yeah, this series looks really, really good, and maybe that's why I feel like this would be a good animated movie.
Yeah, it would be really, really kind of cool.
It just has that feeling like it, not that it matters. Like, this is a series that has lasting effects, but it feels like a big bombastic Justice League story where you don't know what to expect. You feel like the stakes are real, that things have meaning and weight to them. And I've enjoyed it. But you remember that in the current little timeline of this story, the Flash and Superman are trying to keep Lobo protected. John Stewart and Wonder Woman are kind of protecting things in space, and Batman and Hal have gone to figure out what's going on with Darkseid. And in the beginning of this issue, there's a lot of fighting going on as we cut back and forth in the different scenes. We see John fighting Mongol, which is always kind of fun, and just a lot of really big things going on. You can tell this series is rushing towards its conclusion, and I don't know, it's interesting. And they discover basically a bunch of, I don't want to say maybe stasis chambers, or almost like clones of Darkseid that they discover.
Yeah, that's it. And those tubes.
Yeah, there's some tubes there, and then it goes backwards in time. And if you recall, in the previous issue, in issue 4, Superman and Hal were on Oa fighting with the Green Lanterns against Darkseid, and they were losing. And then Superman leaves because of what happens with Martian Manhunter. So basically, Hal is left there to defend Oa by himself because the Green Lanterns have kind of fallen, the Guardians have fallen. And it's basically Hal versus Darkseid. And it's a really cool fight scene.
It is. Especially with those cool Omega beams. I like those.
Yeah, and Hal kind of making a maze construct to trap the Omega beams so he doesn't get hit by them. You've got parademons all over the place. In the meantime, Superman has finally arrived on Apokolips, and he's taking it out on Batman over what happens to John Jones, the Martian Manhunter. And then, Wonder Woman shows up and tries to get them refocused. And then the fight goes on. And then it switched back over, and Darkseid has arrived at the central power battery, and he's aiming to do something with it. And Hal, he's being overwhelmed by parademons. And a really cool moment for Hal is he throws them off and launches himself at Darkseid in the central power battery.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's a cool shot of him going straight on with his ring. Yeah.
And then, we get the famous Darkseid Is line, and the power battery explodes. And I know that this seems like a very familiar concept, considering how many times we've talked about how we're tired of this. But it looks like it's a case of, what you can't decide is, did Hal make it blow up to take Darkseid out, or did Darkseid blow it up to take everybody out and absorb the power? And you really don't know which way it is.
But what a cool shot.
Yeah. So it was interesting from that notion, and then that's how issue 5 ended. And then you jump back to issue 6. Finally, we figure out what's been going on. I mean, we're partially led to believe, because Hal's alive in the current timeline, because remember that scene was a flashback, that Hal defeated Darkseid, because Darkseid's nowhere to be found, and we find these bodies. And it's at this moment that we find out that Hal's really not Hal. Hal is Darkseid. Darkseid has somehow managed to absorb all the power in the battery and take over Hal's body.
kind of like an infection.
Yeah, yeah. And then Darkseid breaks free, and Hal Jordan falls without his ring to the ground. And there's this really cool logo on Darkseid. You know, it's the Omega logo combined with the Green Lantern logo, which was really kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a sweet shot right there too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's I mean, the artist, man, the artistry on this is just phenomenal. I love the way everything looks in here.
Right, right, and it just, again, it feels like everything has weight. You've got Cyborg Superman infused with Brainiac, dealing with a kryptonite knife, fighting Superman, and being overwhelmed by manhunters because he has an army of manhunters with him. And for Flash and Superman, it feels like they're on their feet. Batman's got Darkseid with the Green Lantern powers to deal with, and everybody's almost overwhelmed. And when you look at this is called The Last Ride. It really feels like this could be the end for these characters, at least in this story.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like you said, stakes are high. You know, you get that feeling when you're reading it. I mean, especially when you got all these mashup of characters. I mean, you got a Green Lantern Darkseid now, or I don't even know if he'd be called a Green Lantern Darkseid. He would be called an Omega Lantern Darkseid.
Right.
There it is. I just tagged it. And then you got, the mashup with Brainiac and Cyborg Superman, which, I'm not going to lie, I still like my regular Cyborg Superman. However, I do like this modification here. It's pretty enhanced. I like it. It's cool. And the artist does a phenomenal job with it, even including the dots on him. Yeah,
the visual storytelling, when you compare this to the Green Lantern book we were just talking about, I struggle with some of the artwork in that book, and in this series, I'm just everything. There's at least 2 or 3 panels that are just like I'm sitting there just staring at them because they're so beautiful.
Yeah, he did a knockout job on every characterization.
Yeah, and like in this issue, Darkseid uses the Green Lantern powers to restore Apocalypse. So imagine Apocalypse as we've always seen Apocalypse with all those little flames coming out. Only now they're green flames.
How cool does that look? I wonder how it would fare against Mogo.
Wouldn't that be cool? That would be cool. And then you see Darkseid summoning a whole army of construct parademons.
Bet you there's more than 3,600 of those.
You're right. and then what we find out is the whole thing with Lobo was all a ruse. It was basically to get the Justice League to Apocalypse.
Yep.
They're out to kill him. He's basically Lobo's made himself be bait for these other characters, but his real job was to bring in the Justice League alive.
But let's talk about one of the coolest panels in this is when Batman buys off Lobo.
Yeah. Oh, that was so cool. they get Lobo to join their side by paying him off, and that basically they say that Bruce Wayne's been doing intergalactic day trading to get credits to be able to spend for just such an occasion.
But you know what? It's funny because like when they talk about Lobo, and the one thing he mentioned is he's not a liar. He's a man of his word.
Yeah.
And he's not wrong. I mean, Lobo usually is, and Lobo's usually straightforward with it too. He'll just come flat out and tell you. But what a great ploy. I like it.
Yeah. And then another nice bit of characterization. I had a little bit of a problem with, once again, Hal's the fall guy, right? But Hal comes out of it, and they're trying to basically have Hal hide while they go deal with the situation. And Hal's like, no, I'm not going to let that person, B-word, use me like a puppet. And I'm fighting with you. And he's got nothing. He's got no ring. He's got nothing. It's just Hal Jordan. That's it. But he wants to still be a part of it. And we don't see him again for the rest of the issue. And I've got something I'm hoping we're going to see in the final issue of this series that involves Hal. But we see the Justice League start to take on Darkseid with his Green Lantern powers. And, boy, they're really, really overwhelmed at this point because you still have Cyborg Superman with the kryptonite blade, and you've got all these other beings that have come after Lobo, and now you got Lobo fighting with the Justice League. It's just a really wall-to-wall fight.
I know. And I like the use of Lobo. You don't see enough of him.
No, and it's really cool to see him in this. I think Lobo is one of those characters that has a lot of potential to be used in stories like this. I've always loved. I loved the issue back during the Jeff Johns run where Hal and Lobo interacted with each other. That was really cool. But in this issue, he's fighting alongside the Justice League, and Darkseid is basically winning the day. And the next thing you know, I don't want to say the Spectre of Martian Manhunter because we're not sure what it is, but a version of Martian Manhunter shows up. Like he's almost like a spectral version of Martian Manhunter.
Looks like a construct, even.
Almost. It almost looks that way. So it's interesting to see how John Johns affects this final fight. But like I said, we didn't see Hal anywhere, and my hope is that in order to defeat Darkseid, Hal has to out-willpower Darkseid to get the green energy back.
That would be a cool premise.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Because Batman calls Darkseid an Oa-powered Darkseid.
Yeah.
I like mine better. Omega Lantern Darkseid.
I agree with you, my friend.
Yeah. Batman's got nothing on this guy.
Except for a whole lot of money.
Except for a whole lot of money.
But if you're not reading Justice League Last Ride, I don't know if you want to go pick up all of the 6 back issues, but when this comes out in trade, I'd recommend it because I don't know, every issue's got wall-to-wall action and it feels big and there's this adventure that I feel like it's missing a lot of times in our comics today. So I'm loving it.
I will add this caveat to this issue on my digital copy. At the end is an ad for Batman the Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, which I will say I did genuinely like that when it came out. So there you go. Happy Halloween, everyone, because it's next week.
The perfect the Halloween book to read is Blackest Night, but there's
that is you're right.
There's supposed to be this month, and I haven't seen it come out yet. Maybe I missed it. DC versus Vampires.
I haven't seen that either. It's probably delayed.
Yeah, it's supposed to be out this month. It'll be out at Christmas time. That's how DC's timing is these days.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, good sir. Well, my power ring is blinking, and so we've got some listener feedback. So why don't we take a quick pause, and when we come back, we'll listen to what our listeners have to say.
Will do.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classics and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the Head of Rondo Hatton, only on Monster Kid Radio.
All right, well, my Power Ring has some messages queued up. So Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and play our first message for this episode?
Green Lantern's Myron and Phil, we have 2 messages from Ken. After playing the first message, I will prep the other for playback at your command. Transmission of Part 1 commencing in 3, 2, 1.
Hi Myron and Phil, thank you for answering my comment in the last video. I don't want this comment to be as negative, but after the recent annual, I can't help but see the many similarities to the GL comics of 2015. In both eras, the central power battery is destroyed, the core disappears/dies. John and a group of lanterns are stuck in a mysterious universe and time. A GL with a special weapon, Hal, Joe, and Kelly, is trying to solve the mystery of the core being gone. The Sinestro core takes over and for some reason is more trusted than the Green Lanterns. A former GL with an eye tattoo is recruited to the Yellow Lanterns and redefines fear, and Kyle Rayner is stuck in the Vega system with no one caring about him. Also, there's a heavy emphasis on the new gods and how the core is perceived by the rest of the universe. Not to mention the similarities to the smaller details of that era and more recent story arcs like the assassination of a Guardian in the Jurgens run or the Lanterns having to use rubble instead of their constructs. Honestly, it's disheartening that the writers and editors are just repeating the same things from only 6 years ago. I've only been reading GL monthly for a decade and this is making me want to quit. If the creators don't care enough for the franchise to take it into an interesting and unique direction, why should I care to keep supporting these awful books? I love Green Lantern, but at this point, I want a whole new creative team for this franchise, including the editors.
Hey Ken, fellow Owen, thanks for the feedback. Thanks for writing in. It's always cool when we get listener feedback, and we love hearing everybody's thoughts. There's a lot of points in your comments that I would agree with. I'll touch on the creative team for this franchise. Undoubtedly, that's what Myron and I have been talking about since day one. I mean, we're on issue 7, so we got a few more to go, and I don't really care for what they're doing with the Green Lantern mythos. I mean, granted, every writer has his own niche and he wants to include his own stuff, and I get it, and they want to tell their own story, and I get it, but it just doesn't fit with what I was expecting or what I want. So a new creative team for this, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as far as the central power battery goes, yeah, I mean it's just a trope that's easy to use, and I think Myron would agree with me.
Absolutely. I like how Ken draws allusions to the whole Renegade arc era in the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book, where, the Green Lantern Corps had disappeared, after Hal went on the Renegade part. They disappeared off in those 2 miniseries that were done back in the day. And there's a lot of things that are very similar. He makes connections with Kyle Rayner being stuck in the Vega system to the Omega Men series. And yeah, it's hard not to look at some of this stuff as being not only cyclical but repeatable. And it's unfortunate. And in terms of the creative team on this book, I mean, it's no secret we're not happy with the book. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse any more than we've already done. But it's interesting to look at some of the online commentary, because people are trying to say, well, it's sold just as good as the Morrison book. It's selling just as good as the Morrison book did. So that's a success. And to that, I would say, well, how is it a success if you've taken a book and you've had to star, let's see, this stars John and Joe Mullane and Simon Baz and Kelly Quintella, and it can't outsell a book that stars one character. So there's that. You also have to realize that the Morrison book didn't get any promotion like this book has gotten. It only got promoted for the first issue. And even though it's a Grant Morrison book, it was a very divisive book, and a lot of fans didn't buy it. It didn't perform well for a book, period. It performed, unfortunately, as much as I enjoyed it, it performed in the low 30,000 issue range. And to me, that's, I'd rather shoot for the stars, not shoot for the gutters. And not saying that the Morrison book was in the gutters, but I wouldn't be looking at 30,000 in sales as a good thing by any stretch.
Fair point.
I am hoping that when this 12 issues is done, we move on to something different. I really do. Will that happen? I don't know, because again, to listen to Jeffrey Thorne talk on social media, he thinks the sales are just fine and that DC's happy with it. I don't know why I'd be happy with being mediocre, but this is the world we live in right now with DC Comics.
It's true. Very
all right.
True.
Power Ring. I see we've got a second message from Ken, so go ahead and play it.
Thank you for responding to my email. I'm glad it led to some fun conversations and ideas. I've only listened to your more recent podcasts, so it's interesting to hear from Bill. Personally, I prefer your and Phil's opinion on GL, since only having Hal and John sounds like a nightmare to me. Myron, I really liked your new Guardians team. I hope you're able to respond to my other email comparing 2021 GL comics to 2015 GL comics in your next podcast, and hope you feel better. Let me know the next time you do something like this. I already thought of some more fun questions. What was that Green Lantern Corps 3-part story you mentioned from the 1980s? I've only read the trades from that era, so I still have a lot of gaps in my Green Lantern knowledge.
Hey, Ken, thanks for the follow-up message. It's interesting. When I look at the history of the show, I think when we started, it was in the days after the success of Blackest Night, and there were a lot of new Green Lantern fans. And I think what really worked well with the dynamic between Bill and I was that Bill was the essentially an icon or an avatar for the new reader who didn't have a lot of history with the characters, because Bill himself didn't. So Bill would naturally ask questions that somebody who wasn't as familiar with Lantern lore would ask. And so I think that played really well for us. Whereas Phil and I think, Phil, you and I have a bit of a different pattern because you've got more history with the characters. So I just think it's a different dynamic, but I love both kind of eras of this show for what they are. And thanks for your concern about my health. I've talked before about my birth defect, and the struggles I run into is that I have scar tissue in my esophagus, and so my esophagus doesn't flex and stretch like it should in a spot. And so food often will lodge itself there, and sometimes it is very, very difficult to get it past the point of where the scar tissue is, because again, there's none of that. There's no peristalsis that how everybody's esophagus works. It kind of moves the food down. Mine gets to there and stops, and I have to push it past that point. And sometimes when it gets stuck, and I have to kind of struggle to get with it, it really wipes me out. And one of the downsides to getting older is I don't rebound back as fast as I used to. So there's the old saying, it sucks getting old, but it certainly beats the alternative, right? So it is what it is, and I'll keep chugging along until I can't anymore. But anyway, that 3-part story you talked about was from the 1980s. It was from 1981. It was a 3-part miniseries called Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, and Mike W. Barr did the plots, but the scripts were done by Len Wein, and it features art by Joe Staton. And it was a neat story. It's a little dated, obviously, as a lot of dialogue and things are from back in the day. But this was the first issue of that miniseries, that 3-part miniseries, was where we first meet Aricia. So it was her origin, and it had the reason why I think it would be such a great animated film is because it gives you a lot of Lantern lore in an easy to digest manner. It reminds me a lot of the Emerald Knights movie in a way, because it also stars Krona, which this story does. But in this 3-story arc, we see Tomar-Ray, because he's still alive. It's pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths. He's part of the Honor Guard. And Krona comes back, because Krona at this point, just to give you some history, at this point, the Guardians, the last time Krona was defeated, turned Krona into pure energy and banished him. And so basically his energy was sent packing across the universe. And what happens is that Krona's energy ends up in the realm of the undead. And the paradox of having an immortal who is in the land of the undead cracks a dimensional barrier between the land of the undead and the land of the living. And there happens to be a character named, what was his name? Oh, gosh, I got to think about it. Necron was his name. And it's basically the first appearance of Necron.
Yeah, I remember Necron.
This Necron looks a lot different than the one we saw in Blackest Night, but basically Necron empowers Krona to come back and kick the snot out of the Green Lantern Corps, and Krona attacks the Green Lanterns as they are having a big meeting on Oa, and they are doing, as often happens with the Green Lantern Corps, they're charging their power rings to the power battery, and in what was at the time an original idea, Krona blew up the central power battery and took out a whole bunch of Green Lanterns with it. And so the Green Lanterns were put in a situation of they had 24 hours, basically the charges left in their rings, to find a way to stop Krona and this army of darkness that he brought with him. And it goes very bad. But in the end, it's a very triumphant story. It was a really cool 3-parter. You can find it. There's a Tales of the Green Lantern Corps trade paperback set. There's 3 different volumes. I shouldn't say set because they don't come together as a set, but they did 3 volumes that printed this story, and then it printed some other individual stories that highlighted members of the Corps, not necessarily the Human Lanterns. So there's a story that spotlighted Chip and so on. And they're reprints of some of the classic issues from the 70s and 80s. that round out the collection, and in these 3 volumes. And you can kind of find them. Comixology has the issues. I think they're $2 an issue on Comixology, and $9 if you want the entire trade paperback, which gives you, it gives you reprints of Green Lantern 148, 151, 152, 153, and 154, and Green Lantern 161, and 162, 164 through 167. And that's just in volume 1. There's some Dave Gibbons artwork in there, some Paul Kupperberg stories. A good collection if you can find it. I happened to find the Tales of the Green Lantern Corps at Ollie's, all 3 volumes. I got them for like $2 a pop, which was great,
really
because they're
cool.
originally like $20 a piece. But if you're really interested in the story, that's where I would go looking for it. If you like reading digital comics, I would go to Comixology, because for $2 an issue for those 3 issues, it's worth it. It was a good story. Like I said, some of it's a little dated. Again, this is Aricia before she was aged up. So she looks very much like a 12-year-old. But it was fun.
All right. Well, hey, guess what? We got another one, don't we, Myron? Ring, play the next message.
The next message is from Colin. He has some comments about episode 200. Playback of the message begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hey fellow Lanterns. First, I wanted to say congratulations on your 200th episode last time. It was awesome listening to it and hearing all of the good memories on the podcast. I've written in once before, and I'm a newer fan of the podcast, but I can't wait to be here for the next 200 episodes. I have one question. At the DC Fandome they announced a new GL animated movie, which was awesome. Inspired by that announcement, what GL storyline would you guys like to see adapted into a full-length animated movie? Thanks, and keep your rings charged.
Hey, Colin, another fellow Owen. Thanks for the congratulations, 200th episode. It's cool. It was a fun little discussion I had with Myron and Bill, and of course Myron and Bill were the ones who started this thing, and I jumped on much later, but it's always cool to like I said earlier in the beginning, to have like a roundtable discussion like that and just harken back to the old memories and stuff, and it's funny listening to Bill and Myron talk about their favorites, and then of course enter Phil, and then Myron and I are talking about our favorites, but unfortunately, like, me and Bill didn't have a favorite moment, which is kind of sad, but that's okay. I guess you could say our favorite moment was when I called in on you guys, or when I came on the episode that one time. So thanks for the shout out. Fandome, I'll leave it at that. Yeah, the animated whatever they announced, Beware My Power. I'll believe it when I see it. I want some more info on it. And as far as the full length animated, I mean, we've talked about this many times before. There's so much you could do. A Sinestro Corps War would be really, really cool. I think that would be good now. And then a Blackest Night somewhere down the line. That's shooting for the, I guess, Mars, since that's where Myron's going. So, but those are my picks. What do you think, Myron?
Well, it's funny. If we hadn't already had Green Lantern Emerald Knights, I think that 3-part Tales of the Green Lantern Corps could be adapted and modernized a little bit and be a really cool story. But I think because it would be similar enough to Emerald Knights, I wouldn't go that route. Like you, I think Sinestro Corps War is a story that fans have been wanting to see an animated version of for quite some time. And I would love to see a movie that kind of took the fall of Sinestro and married that up to Sinestro Corps so that it was more of an immediate response to his being booted out of the Green Lantern Corps. But either way, I just think that would be such a cool story. I'm really jonesing for something that's Green Lantern Corps and not just a Green Lantern movie. I want to see something with the Corps, because that's what really separates Green Lantern from every other franchise that DC has. So I would love to see that. And boy, I tell you, I think that if DC did a 2-part Blackest Night animated film, that would be gonzo for me.
Yeah, that'd be a dream.
Yeah, agreed. But Colin, thanks so much for writing into us. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you taking time of the day. Thanks for joining the Owen family, so to speak, and we're glad to have you around. So, Powering, we've got one more to go, so why don't you go ahead and play the message?
Our last piece of feedback comes from a recent iTunes review from Matt. Transmission commencing in 3, 2, 1.
I've been a listener of the podcast of OA for years, so this review is long overdue. Myron and Phil are two of my absolute favorite podcasters to listen to while I work. Myron has a ridiculously impressive encyclopedic knowledge of Green Lantern lore, and Phil is an amazing co-host that has brought his own ideas to the show since joining, like the Know Your Core segment and referring to us listeners as owns. Myron is a Hal Jordan fan through and through. Hal Jordan is the Green Lantern and his personal hero. Phil's favorite Green Lantern is also Hal, but he sees a lot of value in some of the more recent human Green Lanterns like Jessica Cruz and Joe Mullen. The different perspectives these two hosts have is why I love listening to them. It's very easy to get into an argument over who the best Lantern is, or what direction DC and Warner Brothers should take with the franchise. But Myron and Phil know how to keep the conversation interesting and civil. These two guys are fans just like the rest of us, and listening to them is like shooting the breeze among friends.
Matt, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to do an iTunes review. Those are really helpful for the show because when you go to iTunes and you search under a topic, and it'll show, for example, podcasts related to that topic, where you place in terms of visibility is really guided by the number of reviews and the review scores that are out there. So having listeners do an iTunes review helps us potentially get seen by people who are looking for Green Lantern content. So I greatly appreciate that, and thank you so much for your kind words. I'm always humbled by people who think that we're doing something good because I don't know. I guess I'm personally not used to that, so it's a bit of an odd thing for me, but I do think that Matt points out one of our big strengths, Phil, is that you and I, we have common likes and interests, but we have things that are differences too, and we respect those. And so it's like having a conversation with somebody in a comic shop. And, I try to liken our show to, if you were to walk into a comic book shop that you and I were both at, you might overhear a conversation like we're having on the show.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Myron. It'd be really, really cool if you and I ran our own comic book store. That'd be a lot of fun. No, we both bring two different things to the table, but he's really right. I mean, we both have our commonalities. I mean, our passion for the character. We both like Hal, and our passion for the mythos. We set a bar high enough to where I think I think both of us have read enough Green Lantern, and I would assume a lot of our fans have read enough Green Lantern to know that, we put a bar pretty high on who we want to write and art a particular book. And, every so often a writer comes along that changes the certain dynamic of the book, like Jeff Johns and Rebirth, and parts of Venditti's run, and for that matter, Grant Morrison's run. I mean, every writer has their strengths, and some writers have their weaknesses. But, I mean, when you've read enough of one character for so long and you start liking one, and then, of course, that one's replaced, and then you get somebody else, you don't know what you're going to get sometimes, regardless if it's Grant Morrison or Jeffrey Thorne or, for that matter, sometimes you don't know what you're going to get sometimes, and you don't know what direction they're going to take it. But every so often a writer comes along that just really, really, gets you. And I'm at the point now with the Green Lantern book that I want a really, really good writer on it that's passionate about the whole entire Green Lantern mythos, not just stuck on one character, or not just, using it as I want to promote one character and just throw a bunch of others in there to just make sure they get panel time. That's not what I'm looking for. I want a collective embodiment of Green Lantern, and I want something built on it, not just one segment of the DC universe. I want it to build. I want it to explode. But that's wishful thinking, because for the most part, it really, really did, back when in John's run, and then, of course, subsequently after that with Blackest Night and the explosion of all the books and everything like that. But you can't replicate that kind of success, so I'm not shooting for the moon here. I want a good writer on the book that's passionate. And I think Myron would agree, and I think that's where, him and I agree a lot about our sentiments about the book. And you pointed out a lot of things. I'm a big Jessica Cruz fan, and, I'm not a huge Joe Mullen fan, but I like her enough to know that, she has a place at the table too. And, and then of course you got Myron, who doesn't like either of them. But then Myron likes Kelly Quintella, and I, I don't. Just kidding.
It's interesting because for some people reading the comics, they're just stories, right? And there's not what I think you and I have, and that's we're emotionally invested in the mythology. So it isn't just, well, you can just walk away from it. No, this is a mythology that I've spent the great bulk of my life being invested in. So when you don't like the direction it's in, you feel like you're being let down, and I think that's just a normal human reaction. I think the struggle has been when Jeff Johns came back and took over the franchise. It seemed like this was the first time in a very long time that somebody had a vision for the mythology, and they weren't going to throw anything away, and they weren't going to not use it. I mean, if you remember back in the day, Kyle Rayner was offered up to be bumped off when they brought Hal back. And Jeff Johns said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to the fans. The people who loved Hal, I don't want to put, they want Hal back, but not at the expense of bumping Kyle off and putting Kyle's fans through what they went through. Nobody wanted that. So it was like the first time somebody had a real vision of how can I take this and build it? And look at where it went. And we will probably never see that kind of success ever again. But it's a very bitter pill to swallow, seeing a franchise which at one point outsold every franchise except for maybe Batman at DC Comics and could sustain 5 or 6 books at a time to a point where it's one book and it's not a particularly well-written book. And, that's the challenge, right? And, do you hang on? Do you walk away? It's difficult. I mean, I walked away once before. I've mentioned it before. I wasn't really happy with the Kyle Rayner era, and I walked away. And I eventually came back when Jeff Johns came in, and I picked up a few issues here and there, like the whole Emerald Knight story and so on. And I eventually came back, and I'm ready to walk away from it again. I'm going to continue to review it. I'm not buying the book. I have other ways of reading the issue. I have a great comic shop who's very supportive. I'll just put it that way. And it is what it is. And hopefully we'll get back to that at some point, and we'll have better days again. For some people, they like the book. That's their prerogative, but
worth noting that Jeff Johns was responsible for not only, Green Lantern and Hal Jordan. I mean, he also did the Flash Rebirth that launched the Flash in a whole new stratosphere. And the same thing, he also did that with Aquaman when he launched Aquaman into a whole new different level. He reinvented those 3 characters.
Yeah, it's true. And there are some people who like the idea of Green Lantern and they don't care so much about who's wearing the ring and how good the quality is. There are people out there that love everything no matter what. And then there are people out there who hate everything no matter what. And that's just kind of the way it is. And I'm struggling not to be the kind of person that sounds like I hate everything, because I love this mythology. I wouldn't waste my time if I felt I was wasting my time doing this show and doing the blog. I'm not doing it because I hate Green Lantern. That's obviously not the case. But there are some people that just seem to love everything and fawn all over it because there's no standards. And I'm sorry, I've got standards when it comes to what I want out of my Green Lantern, because I know what it can be.
Well, and that's why we don't trash talk. I mean, we may not like the book. We don't trash talk it. We don't trash talk the writer, unless it's something that's taken personal. But at the same time, with all due respect, and this all goes back to what we've always fought to say, is everybody has their likes, and not everybody's the same. Yeah. I mean, it's like if everybody liked this book, if every single person liked this book right now, number one, the sales would be considerably higher. Number two, we'd have a franchise already in the theaters, and we'd have a series, and we'd have merchandise if everybody liked this book. It's clear that a lot of people don't like this book. It's also clear that DC has done a lot with the Green Lantern over the last few years, that they're just not giving it the love that it deserves, and they got other areas of interest that they're focusing on now, and it's like, it's hard to beat what's going on in your cultural atmosphere at this time to make content that's going to surpass the heightened awareness of where we are. Case in point, with with the whole Superman Son of Kal-El, and you know, and of course you can't beat Batman. I mean, I'm not even a fan, but I know enough to know that Batman's selling, and that's just the way it is. So that's where their money comes from. I just don't like that drives the market, and I understand that it needs to, and that's how capitalism works. But like at the same time, it's also a sacrifice to fans that deserve more content than just Batman books. But that's just one man's opinion, right. Or one Owen's opinion.
And I know I have, like, you know, last episode I called the new series crap, and I've called Jeffrey Thorne a knucklehead before. And it's not a frustration, you know. Do I think he's a knucklehead? No. Do I think he thinks he's smarter than he is? Yes. See, I'm doing it again. I don't want to be that guy, and I struggle not to be that guy. But at the same time, I'm going to be critical when I feel it warrants it. But
right. Exactly.
Anyway, thanks so much, everybody, for writing in and commenting and doing the iTunes reviews and all those kind of good things. It really does help the show be visible and so on. So, Power Ring, before we sign off, why don't you tell everybody how they, too, could be a part of the show?
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
All right, Owens and Myron. Episode 201. Episode 201. Here we are. We're in the 200s. Would you call this season 3 or season 2?
Yeah, I don't know. I never really thought about it that way.
Right. So another great episode. Some good books to talk about. Well, 2 out of 3. But which, by the way, I guess the next time we record, that'll be the last issue of Last Ride then, probably.
We'll have to do something here in the beginning of November. Probably that'll be when that finale comes out, so we'll look at that. And then you and I will have to figure out what we do. I know we had some calls to continue working on the Jeff Johns run, because this show didn't start until after Blackest Night was already over with, so those early issues weren't really discussed. So maybe we'll go back and revisit those issues again and pick up where we left off before, or we'll find some fun things to talk about.
Well, we can always just continue on the Jeff Johns thing, because then, sooner or later we'll make our way up to Sinestro Corps.
That's right. I'd love to talk about that again. Anything to revisit some of the Glory Days stuff would be fun.
Exactly.
All right. Well, my friends, again, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks after Phil survives Las Vegas and I survive Mars. And so until then, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. Take care, everybody. The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the Blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.